So tip number 1 is to differentiate and to understand the different damage types. Try and figure out ways to fit in different types of damage multipliers, because all these defense shred, damage bonus, attack percent, they all multiply against each other and will massively increase your damage. Attack is way less valuable than crit damage and damage in general. So instead of trying to focus on buffing up your attack to the absolute maximum, you look at someone like Pele as well. She reduces the enemy's defense by 30%. The damage formula in Honkai works basically the same like it does in Genshin. So reducing enemies' defenses, just like in Genshin, is very, very powerful. Damage is very, very powerful. Attack is not nearly as impactful as you might think it is, because there's a lot of sources of attack in the game. You get flat attack from leveling up your character, leveling up your Lightcone. You get it from your different relic stats, relic sets. There's so many different sources of attack and attack percent in the game. You get a ton from your gloves. It's not a good idea to scale a lot of attack percent when you're building your team and you're building your character. Instead, you want to be focusing more on getting your damage percentage up. It's also why Seele is one of the most broken units in the game right now, is because she has multiple different sources of damage. She has built-in damage increase, and she has resistance penetration. Dan as well, he has some resistance penetration. Enemies at a baseline have 20% resistance to all elements, unless you're up against a specific enemy, which I'll get into later. It's a lot better to build and get, 30% damage, 30% crit damage, and a 40% increased attack than just getting 100% increased attack. Also keep in mind that just like in Genshin, this game has diminishing returns. So if you get a lot of attack, at some point it's gonna start falling off. Effect, hit rate, all these things, all the stats, speed, basically all the stats have diminishing returns. If you're interested in learning more about how the damage works in this game, Prydwen.gg, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. It's a very useful resource, and it will kind of break down how damage works, alongside giving you some examples and give you a better understanding of how damage really works in this game and why some stats are more beneficial than others. I would say it's worthwhile to even just skim through it, and you don't have to read like the math into it or anything like that. That's more for theory crafters or content creators like me. That's why you want to spread out your damage types so that you're not hitting those diminishing returns and capitalizing on all your damage bonuses. Next, I want to talk about buffs and debuffs. You're going to want to try and fit in Annihility and a Harmony character. Some of the most impactful buffs in the game include skills that increase your damage, dispelling a debuff, and increasing action speed, or something like Bronya has where it allows them to immediately take action. Another character like Asta is a great free-to-play option because she increases the speed of all your allies by 36. It's very impactful. The more often they're going to be able to take actions. The more actions, the more skill points, and the more damage windows that you have available to you, the more chances you have of breaking their weakness, so on and so forth. The other type of speed manipulation is slowing down or delaying enemies' action speed. Now, this is not only on characters. I believe Welt has it. That makes him a fantastic character, but there's also elemental reactions that happen. So for example, Imaginary inflicts imprisonment, which delays their actions and reduces their speed. Quantum has a similar effect. There's also the ice element's freeze, and there's some ice characters like and March who can freeze enemies. And the more speed manipulation that you can have in your battle, the more successful and damage opportunities you will have. This is another type of thing where you want to be layering these types of buffs and debuffs on your enemies. If you can fit in, like for example, both March and Bronya into your team, now you have a defensive unit who can freeze enemies and delay their actions, and you have another unit who can buff up your allies and speed them forward, amplifying your damage. So when you're trying to incorporate buffs and debuffs, you want to apply different sources of them, not just damage, but also speed manipulation. Unless you're Bronya and you have like both in your kit. The next tip is that defense is a very good offense. Of course, you're going to want to run like Natasha or Bailu, because healing is very valuable. But you can also run something like this, where you shield up the Fire MC with March's Ice Shield, so that enemies are more aggravated, and you also get shields and all these other benefits. These are going to be the main two sources of defense for free-to-play players. It's going to be Natasha and pairing up March 7th with the main character. Furthermore, you're going to want to layer up your defenses. So maybe you put in Pele or maybe Welt to decrease the enemy's action speed. Speed reduction and freezing basically almost act as a sort of damage avoidance or dodge. Even something like weakness breaking can be considered a defense, because the more times that an enemy breaks, whenever their shield breaks, their actions are delayed. It's also needed to interrupt powerful attacks. So layer your defenses and layer your offenses. If you want more advice on how to properly build your team, I made a video about that, so go and check that out. It doesn't matter if your Sealy does 50 billion damage per turn if she dies in one hit. The next one I want to talk about is potentially the most important one, especially for free-to-play players, and that's actually Wishing. I want to give some advice on how to maximize your damage from the Eidolons. As a free-to-play player, or really any player, you want to look not just at the 5-star character. Don't get tunnel visioned into just getting the 5-star character. Look at the 4-star characters and see if they can provide any value to your account. And this brings me to the Eidolons. Check and see what Eidolons certain characters have, and if there's any sort of impactful breakpoints, and also in the shop. Mainly characters like Dan and Serval. See the characters you have and see maybe you're close to a really impactful Dan constellation. Always try and pull on banners where you can maximize the value, not just the 5-star, but also the 4-star and their Eidolons. Eidolons are a massive increase to your damage. Not saying to necessarily expect it, because this is a gacha game after all, and you are gambling for, you could pull on this, you could technically pull on this like 500 times and never get Pele, but it's something to consider when you are making decisions on what 5-star banner you want to pull. For example, I've had some dreams, and there's a good chance that Su Sheng is going to be on the next banner, or C1 is something that I want to go for, because this passive, this Eidolon is extremely powerful and will greatly enhance my Su Sheng. It's not something that I'm expecting to get, but it's still something that I'm going to try and go for. And also, because I love Su Sheng. She's amazing. Next, I want to talk about Relics. The main thing to be focusing on about Relics is, first off, get your attack up, because most characters scale with attack. Always prioritize your main stats over the Relic set. Just consider these set effects to be additional bonuses. They are not something mandatory. They are not something that you should be working towards. I just happen to be lucky because I got some pretty decent stats for my Sealy that I can like work with and build around. But for the most part, you can take a look at my hook, for example. Like, this is like, she has like 10% increased ice damage. It's like, but it doesn't matter because she has like attack percent and she has crit rate and other stuff to increase her damage. Main stats are always going to be more important than set effects. Set effects are something that you're going to want to aim for very late game. Perhaps you could maybe get away with some planar sphere set effects. Those are probably going to be easier to achieve, but honestly, I don't think you're going to be building towards set effects until Trailblaze level 45 or 50. Main stats will always win over set effects. Also, getting the correct elemental damage bonus for your planar sphere will probably be the biggest increase in your overall damage. The next tip I want to give is to look for character synergies and to read and learn the characters that you're actually using and playing with. So for example, you look at Bronya here. Bronya provides a lot of crit damage and damage bonus. This would pair greatly with someone like Yang Qing. He has a lot of crit rate. So if there's a character that has a lot of built-in crit rate and another character that buffs a lot of crit damage, then it's probably going to be a good idea to pair these two, since they complement each other so nicely. Another example might be Asta. Asta increases the fire damage of other allies. So maybe there's a very slow unit that would benefit from having a lot of speed that also deals fire damage. Sound familiar? That could be someone like Hook or the Fire MC. These characters are innately slower and benefit a lot from having speed, and they also happen to do fire damage. Another tip is to look at what the enemy is weak to, and also to see what their resistances are. You can go ahead and do that by just clicking on the enemy, and you can see here she has a lot of resistances. So you want to build a team that isn't dealing ice damage or physical damage. And obviously you're going to want to bring the recommended damage types so that you can break the weaknesses a lot faster. Another important thing to consider is the enemy level. There is a level penalty whenever you're fighting an enemy. So if Cocolia is 15 levels above you, you're going to be doing a lot less damage to her in comparison if your character was level 60. So make sure to try and get to as high of a level and close as a level to the enemy to maximize the amount of damage you're doing, and so that you aren't subject to the level difference penalty. The last tip is to level up your traces and your Lightcones. These are going to be your most impactful source of damage. Prioritize leveling up your ultimate, your talent and skill, and increase your Lightcone level whenever you can, because not only does it increase your attack, but also increases your HP and your defense. So hopefully this video was able to help you out and you were able to learn a few things to help you deal more damage. If it did, consider subbing and liking for more content from me. But as always, remember to take care and have a fantastic day.